suggested. Yeah, they said we should still suggest mass. Oh? Right.
But he's a dancer and he didn't know Christopher Mark's dance. And he's
Yeah, I
engaged.
danced from here.
Ish. But I was like, you don't know people.
All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church, building community, inspiring growth, creating change. Here in the heart of Kansas City, we come together to create this hour of shared reflection so that we might be renewed in courage for these times and inspired to lives of greater dignity, higher purpose, deeper generosity, and more effective action. If you are new to Unitarian Universalism or to our congregation, we want to get to know you and share a part of your journey. If this place is already your spiritual home, welcome back. We need one another, and it is good to be together again. We are so excited to be together in person again after almost 2 years of gathering only online during the coronavirus pandemic. Nevertheless, through the gifts of technology, we continue to celebrate community and connections with each other online also, as we lean into the values of justice, compassion, and reason. Together, we learn the love that has the power to overcome both loneliness in the heart and oppression in the world. Welcome to our service this morning. May the words and music and images that we offer today nourish our best selves, calling forth abundant wisdom and love.
Arise, O souls, all arise.
Good morning. I'm Don Dickey, a member of this congregation, and it is my privilege to welcome you here on this bright, soon-to-be warm summer morning. And for those of you who are joining us online, welcome as well. Thank you for your participation. At this time, we also welcome our guests and visitors. Thank you for sharing this time together. And my fellow congregants, those who are visiting will be wearing stick-on name tags. After the service, please seek them out and introduce yourself. Take advantage of what might be the beginning of a long, warm relationship. And I have a special shout out. And this is a special thanks to J.D. Mann for helping with the audiovisual tech this summer while Haley was on vacation. J.D. is also a choir member, and J.D. is back there in the corner, and let's give him a round of applause.
I light the chalice this morning for our serious consideration of what influence our UU principles and values should have on our use of social media.
Please stand as you are able for the affirmation of our covenant, then remain standing for the singing and signing of Song 118, This Little Light of Mine. Together we affirm, goodwill is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
This little light of mine.
You know, it sounded like a good way to stay connected. A couple of years ago, I started reviewing the impact of the international Facebook organization, now known as Meta, on what was happening on our social events, social justice events. As I became more aware, All Souls and the UUA, both of the same 7 principles, supported the use of the Facebook tool as a means of communication, I felt we needed to explore the conflicts or potential conflicts. On surface, the Facebook structure, which includes Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp, appears to be another good and benign form of communication with family and others, along with other forms like emails, texting, and websites. But the more I became acquainted, the more I was convinced there were inconsistencies and conflict with the UA principles guiding our ethical and social justice decisions. My intention in approaching both the All Souls and UUA Board of Trustees was to ask them to look at potential contradictions with our principles. With urging, the UUA sequentially offered 4 different avenues I found unfortunately cumbersome and discouraging. After consulting with a former UUA administrator, I shifted and approached our All Souls Board of Trustees using the prescribed pathways by our bylaws. The Board of Trustees asked me to form a task force to study the issues of concern. The members include Mark Hunt, Rita Gannett, Bob Hambrecht, Fred Zeng, Phyliss Westover, and George Baggett. Some, but not all members, use Facebook. Shortly after we formed 1 year ago, our national press started disclosing similar concerns, initially published in August of 2021, An Ugly Truth, a nonfiction book by Frankel and Kane of the New York Times, and the Facebook Files series led by Jeff Horowitz of the Wall Street Journal, plus the revelations by Francis Haugen exposed in part in the Senate hearings. Now, some ask, why are we focusing on Meta and not other forms of social media as media hosting tools? The reason is Meta is the largest media organization influencing over 3 billion users, mostly in underdeveloped countries where it's generally the only form of information available to the general populace. Today, Phyliss Westover, Bob Hambrecht, and I will provide some of the findings, which will include a Q&A following the service. We hope the presentation will be broadening, provocative, stimulating more questions and answers, and worthy of further consideration. And finally, I'd like to thank Kendall Gibbons for offering her time to us, and the task force members, the All Souls Board of Trustees, and especially Anthony Edwards, who directed us for the service today.
Good morning. My name is Isaac Robinson, and I am joined by Sean and Rose this morning to lead us in a congregational affirmation of our 7 Unitarian Universalist principles. Unitarian Universalist congregations affirm and promote 7 principles, which we hold as strong values and moral guides. As Reverend Barbara Wells Ten Hove explains, the principles are not dogma or doctrine, but rather a guide for those of us who choose to join and participate in Unitarian Universalist religious communities. Rose will lead you on your right, and Sean will lead you on your left. So please join me as we affirm our principles.
We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person,
justice, equity, and compassion in human relations,
acceptance of one another, and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations,
a free and responsible search for truth and meaning,
the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large.
The goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all.
respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part.
Thank you.
Now let us sing our children out to their classes. Well, fortunately, you're sitting down because I've got a shocker. I'm asking for your money. A reasonable question is, why? I have been associated with and coming to All Souls since the early 80s. And I've had the chance to learn from many wise people. I've had the opportunity to leverage whatever financial contribution I made with acts of service. I have raised my 2 children here. And this is one of the sterling, shining things that we do, because they teach the children about diversity. They teach them to embrace it, not to fear it. They actively take the kids to other church services during the course of their religious education and let them know there are alternative ways of thinking and of doing things. They teach them values of honesty. We just went through our 7 principles. These are good principles. And unfortunately, in the anonymity that social media offers, some people don't have those values quite so strongly instilled in them. And they use that anonymity to harass, to say unkind things, and to do damage to our society. So, supporting All Souls, I mean, outside of the interaction, it's a business. You have to have a building, you have to make repairs, you have to hire staff, and they legitimately expect their paychecks to be there on time for the agreed amount. Last week, you heard from the pulpit, someone mentioned technology. The technology has upgraded here dramatically in the last few years. It's also upgraded dramatically in the last week. Last week, you were seeing slides projected with a 10-year-old projector. This week, you're seeing them projected with our brand new projector. Sharper, a little higher resolution. So these things do cost money. But once we've got that infrastructure in place, it allows us to interact with people. It allows us to make contributions of time and effort and to benefit as we go through our life phases. So today, I'm asking you, this is to support our general fund, which pays the bills, that allows us to gather together and to benefit and help one another. The offering will now be given and very gratefully received. Please join me in the dedication of our offering. We dedicate our offerings and our actions to the mission at the heart of this congregation, to build a respectful, caring community, to inspire personal and spiritual growth, and to create change toward a just and compassionate society.
Although Facebook's disinformation issues apply to all 7 of our UU principles, we are focusing on just 3 today. Principle number 1, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Facebook's structural practices are antithetical to or inconsistent with this principle. Here are 2 areas. 1, Facebook provides an avenue for light speed biased amplification of disinformation discriminating against racial and religious groups and whole populations, leading to intended migration, starvation, illness, and death. More familiar examples include false information about COVID-19 illness and treatment, and disinformation about the Black Lives Matter movement. 2, Facebook provides and sells users' personal information to advertisers. Facebook encourages destructive behaviors that sway personal decisions. Those with power and money are exempt from any standards.
Principle 2, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Facebook's repeated defense of their practices is that they are providing wholesale free speech. Although Facebook states they remove accounts providing mis- and disinformation and the abuse of human relations, their use of whitelisting and the ease of reopening new accounts belies their safeguards. Their defense of free speech, according to NAACP President Johnson, quote, the same old defense of white supremacists, anti-Semitics, Islamophobics, and other hateful groups, end quote. Little effort is paid for monitoring and posting outside the U.S. for justice, equity, and compassion, and especially in developing economies and underdeveloped societies, openly using the Facebook platform for exploitations. Examples include the Indian officials calling Muslims traitors, online sex trade in the Middle East, and Mexican cartels posting death threats and showing assassinations.
When we go to the UU website, we find the 7 principles, and you'll find this statement by Paige Getty. As responsible religious seekers, we recognize that we are privileged to be free, to have resources to pursue life beyond mere survival, to continually search for truth and meaning, to exist beyond bonds of dogma and oppression, and to wrestle freely with truth and meaning as they evolve. As a faith tradition, Unitarian Universalism makes sacred the right and responsibility to engage in this free and responsible quest as an act of religious devotion. Institutionally, we have left open the questions of what truth and meaning are, acknowledging that mindful people will, in every age, discover new insights. On the screen, you'll find a few thoughts about truth.
be drummed in your dear little ear. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught to be afraid of people whose eyes are oddly made, and people whose skin is a different shade. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught before it's too late, before you are 6 or 7 or 8, to hate all the people your relatives hate. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be carefully taught.
I confessed to my service partners, Butch and Bob, that I feel a bit apologetic for telling you on a Sunday morning what I'm going to tell you. I wish that our research on Facebook had been a sunnier outcome, but it wasn't. And I do not believe that UUs put on blinders to the truth. I'm glad I learned what I did, especially in light of our UU principles and values. So please hang in there while I share some unsettling facts. There has been much publicity about Facebook's mishandling of information. Facebook, now known as Meta, is not the only enterprise circulating disinformation. However, Facebook alone, as a trillion-dollar company with nearly 3 billion users worldwide, is the major player. Likely you know of Frances Haugen, who was hired by Facebook to find ways to keep Facebook from being used to sabotage elections. She left disillusioned 2 years later, taking with her Facebook documents she gave to the Wall Street Journal, which published many. Interviewed on 60 Minutes, Haugen said, quote, "There were conflicts of interest between what was good for the public and what was good for Facebook. Facebook, think Mark Zuckerberg, chose making money over public interest. Circulating controversial posts created more action and therefore more money than neutral facts or agreement. So Facebook allowed the circulation of inflammatory disinformation, even though several Facebook staff flagged the negative impact disinformation was causing. You know ad nausea the Stop the Steal rhetoric. First circulated widely on Facebook, it was then taken up by others. And if you are following the January 6 hearings, you are learning a lot more about what's happening in our own backyard with disinformation. What fewer Americans know is the horrendous damage disinformation has caused outside the U.S. 80% of Facebook users live in foreign countries. Right, 80%. And many believe Facebook is the internet and believe Facebook posts are accurate facts. You may know of the genocide of the Rohingyas in Myanmar, formerly Burma, by the military. In 2016-17, the Myanmar military circulated through Facebook false rumors to the chiefly Buddhist Myanmar population about the so-called misdeeds of the Muslim Rohingyas. Because Facebook only had one staff person who understood Burmese, they could not monitor or censor inflammatory rumors. Consequently, vicious rumors spread. This resulted in the approval of the military to obliterate and expel the Rohingyas. Their villages were burned, men, women, and children were killed and tortured, and mass public gang rapes were orchestrated. Some Rohingyas who did not escape were sent to detention camps to live in horrible conditions, and a law was enforced to prevent their marriage or having children. 725,000 Rohingyas, 3/4 of their population, left Myanmar. Later, Facebook doubled their Burmese literate staff, so they had 2 people to try to monitor 20 million Facebook accounts. Despite the UN World Court of Justice upholding the case of genocide against Myanmar's military, the military's oppression continues. After ousting the elected government, the military took charge of Myanmar, and just this past July executed 4 democracy activists. The UN condemned the executions as depraved. Violence in the Tigray region of Ethiopia has turned to civil war. In whistleblower Frances Haugen's report to Congress, she accused Facebook algorithms of, quote, literally fanning ethnic violence in Ethiopia. My fear is that without action, the divisive and extremist behaviors we see today are only the beginning. What we saw in Myanmar and are now seeing in Ethiopia are only the opening chapters of a story so terrifying no one wants to read the end of it. Reporting immediately after violence in Tigray between ethnic groups last September, freelance journalist Zacharias Zelalem reported that an inflammatory Facebook post, quote, blamed members of an ethnic minority for carrying out murders and kidnappings that took place on September 27th. The Facebook post got hundreds of shares, hundreds of likes, all kinds of reactions. A day later, September 28th, the village cited in the Facebook post was ransacked, burnt to the ground, and inhabitants murdered. Despite multiple efforts to report the post, it remains up and live as of this moment, unquote. In the Philippines, Facebook's sowing of disruption through disinformation has its irony. The New York Times reported that during President Duarte's 2016 campaign, his allies flooded the Facebook platform in the Philippines with disinformation about his opponents and laudatory stories about Duarte. 4 years later, after allegations that Facebook aided disruptive information campaigns in many countries, Facebook put up checks on what politicians and their allies can say online. That resulted in President Duarte's lashing out at Facebook for taking down fake accounts that supported his policies. He threatened to shut down the Facebook platform in the Philippines. Here is what Facebook wrote about its removal of networks for violating Facebook policy against coordinated, inauthentic behavior, such as in the Philippines. Quote, "The people behind this activity coordinated with one another and used fake accounts as a central part of their operations to mislead people about who they were, what they were doing, and that was the basis for our action. When we investigate and remove these operations, we focus on behaviors rather than content, no matter who's behind them, what they post, or whether they're foreign or domestic," unquote. It's interesting that in this statement, Facebook acknowledges that they ignore content in shutting down Facebook sites. So, the fact that their own staff has flagged damaging disinformation does not result in stopping the spread. As to Facebook's focus on the behavior of the party doing the posting, it depends on who is doing the posting. Investigations have revealed that Facebook selectively allows some parties to post content in violation of their policies if the party is a prominent contributor to Facebook profits. So, there have been some slim attempts by Facebook to mitigate disinformation, but the overwhelming modus operandi is to put making money first. It's chilling to think where humanity is being led with disinformation. If we can't agree on basic facts, we're undermining civil society. The recognition of fact, truth, is as necessary to our lives as gravity. Every Sunday, we say, as part of our covenant, that we seek the truth in love, and as part of our mission statement, that we aspire to create change toward a just and compassionate society. So how do we live with Facebook, an American company that keeps us in touch with family and friends? What changes can we make in our communication toward a just and compassionate society? We're not here to play Ain't It Awful. UUs have never shrunk from thinking through a problem. So, let's remember Margaret Mead's words as a battle cry. Quote, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has," unquote.
So what's behind the curtain? Or understanding accelerated algorithmic amplification, big words. For us to learn the shortcomings of social media, and in particular Meta, we must first become familiar with certain terms, and I'll go through those briefly. Okay, surveillance capitalism. These are companies or governments that morph into surveillance empires and are empowered by architectures of behavior monitoring, analysis, targeting, and predicting what we should see. China is a perfect example of a government-sponsored surveillance society. It is the most sophisticated surveillance empire in the entire world, described in Isabella Keon's article in the New York Times this past July. Their system collects personal information, including retinal scans, facial recognition, voice imprints, phone trackers, DNA, plus reading, buying, traveling, and entertainment habits of persons, building the largest database currently in 25 of the 31 Chinese provinces. It creates a personal dossier regardless of any criminal activity that authorities can generate on anyone and is accessible to officials across the country, all in the name of safety. I think we've heard that before. So what is epistemic chaos or knowledge chaos? As we look at societies where social justice has been suppressed or eliminated, these concepts become reality. We frequently hear friends saying, I don't know what to trust anymore or what to believe anymore. I referenced an article, The Coup We Are Not Talking About, published in the New York Times in January of 21, written by Shoshana Zuboff shortly after the attempted coup. She writes, our conversion into an information civilization puts it at risk for who owns our personal information, how is it distributed, who has the authority that governs its distribution, and who or what has the power to protect that authority. In some cases, there are constitutions. In countries with few institutional standards or drifting towards that place, a stifled or absent press, and a populace seeing Facebook as the internet, the ownership and management of information offers an easy pathway for the development of authoritarian states vis-a-vis what we call epistemic chaos, where the final stage being where nobody knows what is true. When what is considered as fact with no capacity for vetting, it becomes fact. Let me give you an example. Some of you heard Stephen Ayers testify in the J6 hearings. He said he was inspired to attend the rally and invade the houses of Congress by constantly viewing posts on Facebook and Instagram. To paraphrase, once he turned off those social media sites and reviewed vetted information, he realized he has been misled, costing him his livelihood, the loss of his job, and his home ownership. Now let's address the algorithm. It is designed by social media, in particular Facebook, and is definitely a secret. So understanding it from the outside is a bit of a challenge. So what is an algorithm? An algorithm is simply a sequence of well-defined instructions typically used to solve a specific problem. For example, medical decisions. The algorithm is populated with a series of questions answered with yes-no options. This is the meta business model. And in the case of Facebook, it is not based upon optimizing friendly communications, but rather growing user numbers, keeping users tied to the meta site and their phone, monetizing the user's private information, and then selling the private information for those wishing to advertise or exploit us. The algorithm derives answers to its questions based upon the user's collected history. That is, their postings, what they bought, what they shared and reshared. The algorithm takes over our decision-making or critical thinking and directs us on what to search, visualize, and read with built-in biases. The user's choice is surreptitiously hijacked. Another example. On Facebook, you decide whom to befriend, the pages to follow, and which groups to join. But once you've done that, the Facebook algorithm then decides which posts you see and don't see, and each time you open your feed. It's a highly personalized, attention-seeking algorithm to grab us and keep us online. So what is sharing and resharing? Sharing is just passing on items, photos, or news important to us. If the item comes from others and shared, then it's termed resharing. Let's address ranking. Users' posted information is secretly ranked in an algorithm and given a value. It ranks various items, even photos, either boosting or decreasing the value for the user's usage. Anger and resharing ranks the highest, and in practice, some politicians and those encouraging disinformation have found that using the Facebook platform secures them more attention and higher ranking values, thus drawing more attention from advertisers. So anger and resharing drives what we see first. Newsfeed. Newsfeed is a customized scroll of friends' photos and other links to stories, news items, posts considered important to us and our supposed friends, and is ranked according to the algorithm. Evidence has shown that, according to Facebook's internal studies, that newsfeed is the driver for providing disinformation, anger, and sometimes violent behavior. How about the like button? It seems pretty benign. Just clicking the like button, however, initiates a search leading to a secretly ranked formula by Facebook and includes 10,000 factors commonly referred to as the newsfeed algorithm. The like button gives insight into our activities to better target us with advertising or manipulation. The concept dates back to what was acted out in the Mad Men TV series in the 60s, but now with nanospeed distribution, transmission is immediate to billions of users. I want to emphasize that the idea of connection is not always malevolent and is commonly used as a means to communicate with like-minded individuals, sometimes for good and sometimes not. Finally, what is cross-checking or whitelisting? Facebook provides content review for persons or groups with attempts to monitor the content of messages with the intention to prevent violent behavior and disinformation. Whitelisting, however, allows certain persons or groups to bypass any content monitoring. Those numbers now exceed 6 million groups or persons. Often they are wealthy and with political power. To summarize, accelerated algorithmic amplification is a messaging system mastered by Meta, making decisions for us with the capacity to rapidly magnify information and disinformation to over 3 billion Meta users within a nanosecond, and the potential for epistemic chaos and the development of or perpetuation of an authoritarian state.
So, can good people use Facebook? Yes, of course. Butch asked me to join the task force, and I was amused to later learn that he was looking for a conservative perspective arising from my belonging to a former conservative religious tradition. Let me say that the folks in my former religious tradition were also looking for a conservative perspective in me, and here I am. I came to the task force confessing I was a free speech purist. I taught high school English. I taught my students there are no bad words. There are only bad contexts. If we care about our listeners, we will choose our words to suit their ears. I don't want anyone regulating my speech or yours. I only rarely use Facebook to keep in touch with some high school friends. I don't know about the news features, algorithms, or dark places, and I've never touched a like button. But the study and conversation I've had on the task force have made me realize that Facebook has caused some problems, big problems. Our task was to determine the conflict between Facebook and our UU principles. I confessed early on that I expected the values between a profit-making corporation and a religious organization to be in conflict, and I was not disappointed. But what is our response to the egregious harms that Phyllis has outlined and the design flaws that Butch has just explained? Are these harms and flaws essential to their business model? All we read tells us that this is how they increasingly find their ways into our wallet. I get it. It works for them. My first written response to the task force was on the effects of the algorithms, how the casual user with a normal, healthy curiosity could quickly find themselves in a dark world of anger and hatred. This is how Facebook keeps users online. It works. And I share Phyllis's outrage at the mayhem done by bad actors using Facebook as a tool. I think in its early days, Facebook was simply not up to the task of monitoring the use of its product. Zuckerberg gave the impression that this was not high on his agenda. But Facebook has matured beyond its early incompetence and cavalier attitude. A team of legal and social media experts, 50 of them, now meet weekly to deal with these issues. What speech do we allow, and whom do we censor? An example, The Vindicator, a small-town newspaper in Texas, wanted to publish online the Declaration of Independence before the 4th of July, the celebration in their hometown. But Facebook censored and blocked the piece slated for July 2nd. That portion mentions Indian savages and how King George was using them against us. It took days to resolve. Is this hate speech? Would you censor it? In his excellent book, David Kay documents the struggles social media companies, governments, users, and free speech advocates have trying to regulate appropriate speech. He makes the point that because we have the First Amendment guarantee of free speech, our government can do little to fix this problem. But European countries are not bound because they do not have the First Amendment. But even for them, finding the sweet spot between safe speech and free speech is elusive. So, what to do about this mess? My concern today is with misinformation or disinformation. They thrive on the internet. I don't blame Facebook for creating misinformation, only for amplifying it. But back to the struggle for truth. Again, Page said of our fourth principle, we have left open the questions of what truth and meaning are. A few weeks ago, the UU pastor from Lincoln, Nebraska, told us that the annual UU meeting was struggling with adding an eighth principle, and he focused on the struggles between liberal and liberation theologies. He said the struggle between humanism and liberalism had been solved. Oh, really? As Lassa would say, After the service, I went and sat next to Phyllis and shared my reactions to the message. I told her that for me, truth is empirical and rational. Pi is true. The periodic table is true. The frequency of blue light is true. These are known and verified. Oops. Theologies and ideologies, these are culturally derived and malleable. Should we call them true? When I teach my grandchildren about what is true, I use a plumb bob. I can go into any mosque, madrasa, synagogue, or church on this planet and determine what is true. Do theologies and ideologies measure up the same way? Do histories, or are they simply written by the victors, as we're told? Phyllis asked me about the truth of love, community, and compassion. Are these not true also? How do we talk about truth? Can we even define it? It's in our liturgy here. We covenant to seek the truth in love. We sing out our children with truth on their lips. Is truth culturally derived, or must it be scientifically verified? I was recently with a family member who told me while sharing watermelon that he had had a religious experience that was real. Real how? Did it just seem real? Did it feel real? Or was it verified as real? Do I challenge his assertion? No, I say, please pass the salt. There was no seeking truth here. Love prevented it. But back to our task. Does Facebook seek the truth in love? Does it send us away as we log out with truth on our lips? No. We must be very careful when somebody peddles the truth for profit. And I guess that's where I end up with Facebook. And unless and until we can state clearly what makes something true, we are doomed to the reign of misinformation. So let us on with the search for truth, freely and responsibly. Let us carefully teach our children how to know and whom to trust. Then their little light will shine truly. May truth be revealed.
Please stand and join in singing song number 117, We're Building a New Way.
We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. Hate and greed and jealousy. We are working to be free. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. Start with love, that is the seed. We can feed our every need. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Without these, this world will die. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Without these, this world will die. Peace and freedom is our cry.
Please be seated. A Nigerian proverb claims that the truth passes through fire and does not burn. We've shared many thoughts with you. We don't have the answers. As we extinguish this flame, it is up to all of us to be the fire that seeks truth and love, becomes agents of compassionate change, and preserves the worth and dignity of every person. After the service, Butch, Phyllis, and I will remain here for a Q&A if you'd like to extend the conversation. Thank you.
Since what we choose is what we are, and what we love we yet shall be, the goal may ever shine afar. The will to win it makes us free.
right, come join us, come join us.
Sorry. We can talk about them during the Q&A. Well, they'll probably put it online, yeah. Hi, Mark.
Hey, guys.
Hi, hi, hi.
Thank you. Where'd I leave this? Oh, thank you. Thanks, guys, for coming in. It's my son, Mark, and Laura.
Oh, well, good to know you.
This is it.
Shall we try to get more people up here to sit down?
We'll have to wait just a minute and see what happens.
If you all have questions or want to get into a discussion, just come up and sit closer so we don't feel so far apart.
Thanks, Carol.
Thank you.
Thank you.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay,
Start
are
us
we on?
rolling.
Yes, okay. If you find yourself, I've not used Facebook, but if you find yourself on the short end of the stick and people are attacking you, are there any mechanisms you can use to get some help against the lies or misinformation?
Well, I'll give one response. Maybe ironically, I got a message back in March of 2020 from Facebook saying they were closing my account because I had done something unseemly. Did they tell me? No. In checking this out with someone else, they said, well, your account has been hacked. And if your account has been hacked, they're just going to shut you down, which is what they did. They said they would investigate it. Well, I tried, in answer to Don's question, to contact Facebook. There's a mechanism online that you can use, so I tried that, no response. So I sent them a letter, just a snail mail letter, no response. Well, I did get this response. They sent me another canned message saying that since I had disagreed with their findings, they were going to investigate further, and if they found that I was still a bad girl, they were going to close my account, or if they found there was no problem, they would open it again. Well, nothing happened either direction, and so here we are in 22. And, I get messages that several of you, send in things, and I get a notification in my email that there is a Facebook from so-and-so, but if I try to open it, I just get this message saying that my account is frozen and that I disagree with them. And so, you know, there's no avenue. So, Don, I don't know what you could do to get a response. Since 2020, I've been trying to get one, and I haven't found one. If anybody here is wiser in how to get a response, let me know. Other questions?
I can tell you that my observations over watching this for some time is that the tool that is not repairable. The tool meaning whether it's Meta or any other organization, that they provide these algorithms, you cannot control it. They have a machine that is totally out of control. So every time they come up with solutions, they fail. Primarily for a variety of reasons. One is their profit motive. And I can't ignore the fact or denigrate them for trying to make money, but their promotions are totally opposite. It's all about profit. It has nothing to do with communication. And that's what dissatisfies me. So, but I don't think there's really a solution except not using it. There are other ways to communicate besides Facebook or other social media, but our society has given away to this simple way of trying to communicate in a thoughtless way and reading things that are promoted for them for profit. We're turning over all decision-making to a for-profit institution. And also, if we have an authoritarian society, as we're potentially approaching in our own country, we will be doing the same thing. They will be using the same tool. That's what in 2016 was done for the election of Donald Trump. They mastered Facebook, mastered it.
Would you offer some guidance to someone, you know, a newbie like myself, if I were to decide to join Facebook? Are there some caveats, some guidance that would help me do things in a proper way and not be subject to some of the abuse, or is it hopeless?
I don't think there's a solution. I think you just have to acknowledge that that's going to be part of it. I don't think you're going to change anything about them. Yeah, Bob.
Yeah, I just thought I'd open up a different perspective. It's sounding like I might be the person that uses the Facebook most around here, and I don't use it all that much. But I love seeing the pictures from my niece and her daughters and keeping up with the family. I have other friends that use it for family. I get hints from them every now and then. They're stressed by some negativity coming into their Facebook world, but for the most part, it's a benevolent, good way to keep in touch with people. But I know that out of the 3 billion users in the world, there are pockets of those that are being exploited by Facebook's capitalist motivations. But still, it strikes me it's a tool like fossil fuels are a tool. I still drive a gas-powered car, and it provides a lot of benefit, but and I hope and work towards better solutions coming around for transportation and energy and that sort of thing. And like nuclear power, electricity too cheap to meter. Well, didn't turn out that way. There's some issues with nuclear power. So it seems with all technologies, we have to learn how to use it and how to regulate it and how to manage it. And Facebook grew so fast with irresponsible leadership that we're finding there's problems with it out in the world, but I'm personally not affected by those because I don't use it the way a lot of people do. But there's a lot of small businesses that get their businesses up and running, and maybe 80% of them use it as a good tool, and maybe 20% of them have problems with it that cause problems for their business. So it seems to me we live in an imperfect world, and Facebook's a big, powerful tool that grew real fast, and we got to figure out how to get regulation in place that can help regulate the bad parts of it, but not throw away the good parts. So anyway, just want to throw that perspective out there.
Bob, you want to talk about the Senate Bill 230?
No, I don't think I can speak intelligently about that. That's the clause in the is it the FCC or was it ICC regulation there? If you put information, if you're a newspaper and you put out false information, you're liable. You're subject to liable charges. But when media organizations online do this, they can't be held responsible for information that's posted by a third party, and that's what 230 is all about. You can't get at them because they didn't create the data, the information.
Are they like a phone company or a newspaper?
Correct. Yeah, they're just the mailman, right? Is what they tell you. But they're not just the mailman. When you look at these algorithms, if it was the post office doing this, just imagine the mail you'd get.
Well, I think, Bob, the last part of your comment hit the nail on the head. The regulations, but it's in the book that Bob was talking about, Kay's book, Daniel Kay.
Mm-hmm.
He points out that in our society that we're essentially doomed because of the Second Amendment and the power of money, and I think that is part of the problem. So I think just making people aware. Now, I'll tell you, in response to getting your things about getting pictures, we don't use Facebook. We get plenty of pictures about our grandkids, and we get all constant communications, either by texting, email, or FaceTime. So it's not like you have to live with that.
I'm sure there's other ways to do it.
Yeah, and other ways that you don't support a system like that.
Yeah, well, my niece likes to do things like that.
Well, that's her problem.
That's how I find out about her kids. And, like I say, I have other friends that use it for those benevolent uses. But the thing about free speech is, who decides what's good and bad? Like you referred to the principles of, the free and responsible for truth and meaning, but we're not going to say what truth and meaning are. That's for us to figure out and to work on. It's a constantly working on it. And the comment about, is Facebook consistent with our principles? And it's like, well, no. But to me, that's sort of like saying, is the world as we find it consistent with our principles? No.
Exactly.
But as an organization, then we work on what can we do since we believe in our principles, what can we do to influence the rest of the world to be more like our principles? Because we think that's a worthy endeavor.
One word that we came up with in our discussions was we found that the word truth was probably the wrong word. Value is what we should use instead of truth.
I have a dilemma with it in that I'm very involved with the League of Women Voters. And the League, when I first got involved, it was totally an organization of little old women. And, but, it now is much bigger and much younger. I can't believe how young some of the members and really active members are. And I think that is, rightly or wrongly, I don't know, attributed to the use of social media. And so we often are urged to share things, to do posting, to support the posts of the organization at, all levels, national, state, Kansas City. And that does make sense to me because, I see the posts, and there are posts that are really excellent, good information for people to get about voting, about many things. And yet I don't feel good about it because I know Butch has talked to my husband and me and others about the problems, and I totally believe it. I totally believe in it, in the evil of the algorithms and all that, and the motivation. But that is a dilemma that I have.
Another just side point on that is that a while back, the League had an education thing about disinformation, and specifically about in social media. And they gave, these people who had really looked into disinformation a lot had made it clear as far as in social media, the only thing, it won't cure it, I don't mean that, but the only thing you can do to not feed it, fuel it, is do not respond. If you see something that you know is disinformation, to, don't even give it not a like, but how there are other things you can give where you're angry or that kind of thing. And certainly don't share it, and don't even comment. Don't even say this is bullshit, because anything you do feeds the algorithm, right? Okay, so that was the only advice that we all got that I recall on that. But it certainly wasn't to give up on it, because, there's a belief that the only way we really can continue to get younger members is by being present in the places that they go. And so all the various platforms. Now, one totally side note, but a digression to something somebody was talking about earlier, in terms of the Rule 230 or 320 or whatever it is, and it is, I'm sure, the FCC, but how does Fox News get away with it? Why aren't they held to the same kind of standard that, the New York Times or any newspaper would be held to? So anyway, that was just
I don't know this, maybe somebody in the audience knows this, but I think Fox News, as Drew has pointed out, is just an entertainment. Yeah.
Broadcast news is entertainment.
Right, yeah.
There's absolutely no requirement to tell the truth.
Yeah, yeah.
And is that visual and just heard, like radio and television?
Yeah.
Right.
The Fox News attempted to open a bureau in Canada, but they had to get a change to the Canadian Constitution, because everything, including broadcast news, is required to tell the truth to the best of their knowledge. And they tried to get it changed with the last conservative governments, and how we could get it done. And therefore, they did not open a bureau.
Okay. Read them.
Well, it doesn't stop 8% of them getting Fox News, because 8% of them live within 100 miles of the U.S. border.
Yeah. Read them.
I have a problem, because I like Facebook, because I do photography and I do it with international groups, but I don't respond to a lot of stuff. But just lately, a Sandy Hook parent was suing one of the broadcasters or the person that had a show that was saying it was all hoax, and they were saying, well, it's freedom of speech, but there was the clause that if it's inflammatory, then it's not the freedom. So I'm just wondering if that's something that they can do with Facebook, that some of these things are not the truth, and it is freedom of speech, but it's inflammatory. It causes ill will to others. I don't know.
Well, that was a civil case.
Right.
And they could demonstrate damages. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And Don, I've been thinking here about your question, what can we do about Facebook? It seems to me there's three things we could do. We can persuade 3 billion people to stop using it. We could get our Congress to pass a law, or we could buy it. Beyond that, I don't know that there's a solution.
Well, I remember back in the 60s, there were a lot of bomb threats against airplanes. And people would get on the telephone, and back then you couldn't trace phone calls like you can today. AT&T never got in trouble for transmitting those bomb threats. And so Facebook is somewhat in that position, as are the other medias. But also, you know, who should be doing the monitoring? There was a story I read a few months back. Somebody was holding an online class teaching chess. When he used the word attack, his site was shut down for half an hour.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was a totally harmless use of the word, correct word, in chess parlance. So maybe algorithms can get smarter, but then you've got this big brother sort of looking at you all the time. I mean, it's kind of hard to balance. And maybe we need a more rigorous definition of what free speech means.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's 80% of content monitoring is done by artificial intelligence. And so it's good stuff in, bad stuff out. So it's just derived by people. And there have been considerable problems with the AI monitoring. But if you look at Phyllis's example in Burma or Myanmar, they have like 180 dialects, and they had one person trying to monitor that. Same way in the Philippines and other countries, they don't have enough persons to do it. And plus the fact, most of the people that are monitoring in these countries, including the United States, are not necessarily culturally informed about the culture. So what they consider abnormal or bad may not be bad at all. So I think, again, the tool is the problem, and the tool has to be regulated. The problem is when you get an authoritarian government like Trump proposes, or his colleagues in the Republican Party propose, then you've got a problem that they're then controlling what we see, think, also through, and read.
Yeah. I think they have found a way to filter and manage, I think, terrorism and child pornography so that they keep those off of their platform. So it is a capability they can develop, and developed it in that way. But political stuff, they've had a really hard time with, and foreign countries. They haven't staffed it up or even defined what they think they should be doing. So, and then the algorithm is, yeah, you want to have artificial intelligence to take care of most of the stuff that's easy to identify, and then the 20% is the hard stuff that individuals have to figure out. But I kind of agree with their approach of looking at are there people getting together with fake accounts to amplify things and try and stop that, but then they have their own amplification algorithms to increase their profits. So, yeah. So they've got a little hypocrisy going on in that one.
Oh, definitely. If we think back again about what Suboff said, who owns our personal information, how is it distributed, who has the authority that governs, and then the power to protect the authority. Those are the problems. And so it depends upon I'm sorry? Who owns our personal information, how is it distributed, who has the authority that governs this distribution, and who or what has the power that protects that authority. And that's a dilemma with a informational civilization. And it's not that offers any solution. It just points out there's going to be problems on either side of the coin. And it takes the whole reason we're doing this is just to raise awareness. And awareness starts at a small level. When I approached the UUA, they were the Yowbutt Society, I call them. Yowbutt. And they offered these avenues, totally discouraging me. So, but if we keep pressure on them, they can look at other ways, and we can all learn how to spread the word, just like Mary Lindsay was talking about. Don't do certain things. I mean, because it can be, the problem is it goes out in a nanosecond. They say, well, we take it down. Well, once it's out, it's out. And so that's the problem. So I think awareness is the biggest thing. And so many people may be minimally aware, but most of them, and then just ignore it. But a lot of people just don't have a clue. They don't have know anything about what Phyllis was talking about. Drew.
Well, Facebook, they had to, I believe, come up with a method for opting in personal information in Europe.
Yeah.
They had to come up with algorithms that would satisfy the Chinese government as far as filtering out certain things. And they were able to do it. Now, I don't know if that works perfectly, but they were able to do it. Yeah. And that says they can do it.
Again, the problem is that you have the Chinese government is, as I pointed out, is using platforms like this to control society. And again, societies that are authoritarian, this is exactly what they want, because they can control what you think, read, eat, and say. And if you don't, like in China, you're in trouble. Carol.
You said Congress. So what is different about the Canadian system that made it possible to make some,
Drew was.
Yeah, what's the law, what's the legal difference, and what's the potential path for a change of that nature here?
We're streaming this. Could you speak to the microphone so it'll get out?
The Canadian Constitution, which, by the way, didn't exist until 1879. They had in their Constitution that all forms of communication, when it came to news, had to tell the truth to the best of their knowledge. In other words, anything they printed or said or broadcast had to be the truth to the best of their knowledge. And Fox News refused to agree to that, and therefore didn't open a bureau there. And Fox News has readily admitted in this country that they don't tell, they lie.
Yeah. A couple of people have said things about the telephone and mail system. David Kay in his book talks about this. He said that it used to be we lived in a flat availability where if you went into a bookstore or a news office, news agent, you could pick the papers you wanted to read. But as soon as you click one key on Facebook, they pre-select for you which of those choices you'll have available to you. And that's the effect of the algorithms.
Yeah, I think that's true of a lot of modern technologies. I think covering the accelerated algorithm thing is, I think, the key to the problem with Facebook. The amplification of anger and things that get people riled up, because it's clickbait, and which is not healthy for our society. But as a communication tool, it's wonderful, but for them to amplify that clickbait aspect of it is like a disease taking hold. I mean, Google does the data collection, individual data collection. That just helps, okay, I looked at a pair of shoes online, so then I get ads for more shoes. Like, okay, cool, I get ads for shoes. But China is much more invasive with surveillance cameras and having a merit system that they base promotions on and all kinds of things like that. So, but it's all the same kind of AI technology of crunching data and using it for whoever's purpose. So right now the main thrust is simply marketing goods to us because we're a happy consumer society that wants to spend 110% of our income. But then when you get into the political realm, that's where the last election and the Myanmar situation really get the poisonous aspect of the technology out there.
Well, Phyllis pointed out, and I mentioned it too, that in most of the societies in the world, Facebook is the internet. Yeah. And so they think what they read. That's all they know. So we have all these different newspapers, all these other blogs, et cetera, and we can choose The problem is when we allow somebody else to choose for us, a for-profit institution hoping to make money off of us, then it creates a problem. And then on the other hand, if you have authoritarian government telling you what to read, so it's really a problem.
And another thing that occurs to me is that we've had in this country for decades the belief that although we want to believe in free speech, that does not include screaming fire in a crowded theater. Now, I don't know if that is a law anywhere, but certainly it's common belief. And I see similarities to Facebook in that you can have free speech, but if it's going to create murder and another horrible things in Myanmar or Ethiopia, or you can just go on and on and on, that falls in the same category, that somehow should be blocked. But I don't know what all of the mechanisms are at this point to try to stop that.
Another example on your list could be January 6th.
Yes, exactly.
Well, I think it was Carol who brought up something about political advertising, I think, at least it brought me to thinking of that. And that, you know, how in the United States, there are federal laws dealing with truth in advertising. There is none in political advertising. So the mountain that we would have to climb to get Congress to do anything is so immense when you realize that even something as basic as that political advertising can't be big fat lies. You know, that isn't even accomplished. Just a thought.
One dilemma is, as Bob talked about, is truth is a misnomer. And so when you try to define truth, you're going to fail. And I think that's probably why, you know, after the Congress Senate hearings on Facebook highlighting Haugen, you know, that's kind of gone quiet. Because I think that we realize that people in the Senate and the House realize that freedom of speech is just blocking them. And it's not one other point. If we control it too much, we get Black Lives Matter not able to go out because people would say, well, it's violent. Well, I think the data was totally the opposite way. But it's just a real horrible thing. And I think the issue still is the tool and the nanospeed broadcast of this information, and people not have critical thinking anymore. See, so that must be true.
Yeah, well, and I think too, when you think of the money that is behind all of this, or being generated through all of this, that, you know, I mean, our Congress is very influenced by their funding. And so, I mean, it would make it that too would make it difficult to get much accomplished because of conflicts of interest, shall we say.
I seem to remember the last iteration of trying to deal with false political advertising was they insisted that candidates had to say, and I endorse this message or something about it, because no politician would lie in their own name, right? And one other thing very interesting, about 2 years ago, I was trying to find a friend of mine when I was 16 years old, and I went on Facebook and requested someone who shared his last name to friend me, and didn't hear for 2 years. I got rid of Facebook off my machine, and then I got an email just 2 weeks ago that, yeah, I am his daughter, you want to talk to him. So I had to reload Facebook to do this. And when I went to reload Facebook on my iPhone, you go to the iStore or the store and you say Facebook. At the top it said, would you rather use this product? Which I thought was interesting. Here's another product you might want to use. And I clicked away and I didn't even pay attention to what it was.
What I wanted to add was something along that line, that Facebook is just too big, you know. it's just huge and it's pervasive. And there should be some, or there is somehow, a way to encourage other platforms to compete against Facebook. And one thing that my son is on Reddit all the time. And one thing that they have that is beneficial is they have small groups that can control within themselves what is said in their group and you know, tell other people to go away. But there's no way for us to monitor our account on Facebook. I mean, we can, I guess there's some broad principles, but it seems like we should be able to have a smaller platform that we use more personally and have more input into how it's run and what's said on it.
Carol, you know, the that's been addressed by a lot of people. What Facebook or Mark Zuckerberg has done in the past, when there was competition, he just bought them. Instagram was bought to control. He said, oh, I'm not going to change it all, and suddenly the whole philosophy went the same way. So he just, and so, but on the, back to the response about what we can do, Apple had a big impact on the value of Facebook stock. I think it dropped by a third or a fourth when they blocked certain use of information. So there was some, and it was a big financial impact, which has caused a big change in Meta because of the Apple iPhone company blocking their use of selling this information on their site. So there are ways to control it, but it's all financial. It has nothing to do with ethics. It was all financial.
Well, I think if I had access to a small group where I felt like I had control and security, then that's something I'd be willing to pay for.
Yeah. Well, you can do that right now with email. You just have a list of people, and then they just correspond back to the whole group. You just put it on your address. You just put all the addresses, and people just respond back to the group by email. So, I mean, it may be a little more cumbersome, but we have, I know we have several groups that we send out group notices to, and they can correspond back right away. We don't go through anything, so it's private.
Right.
But it doesn't cost anything. There's no advertising on it, and we send pictures, family, and all that. No advertising on it. No.
Well, that would be good. I'd like something a little slicker that's a little less cumbersome than all those email addresses.
Well, once you develop them, it's very slick.
Maybe we need to have you do a...
When we started this thing, I remember the conversations and when we were Zooming these things, these meetings we had, we were looking for the lever. Where's the lever we can pull and get some control over this? And 230 is probably the only tool that is really going to offer us any opportunity to affect this. And I don't even know how you go about getting Congress to change that. Good luck. Talk about money at work.
Well,
Yeah.
like the Margaret Mead quote, you start with things like this.
Well, we've reached past the noon hour.
Yeah.
It has been an excellent presentation, a lot of food for thought, fewer answers than we had hoped for, but you know, you've enlightened us, and I thank you very, very much for a lot of hard work.
Thank you. One last thing. I sent a letter, one of a series, but recently to the UUA, to the president, the vice president, the treasurer, everybody on down the line, and said that we were streaming this today. They could, but I don't get. They have blacklisted me now. They don't respond back to anything I send to them.